Second Timothy chapter 4. We're we're working our way through from verse 9. Do your best to come to me quickly, for Demas, because he loved this world, has deserted me and has gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Now, there's not a lot there, but there is this much. Where Demas has deserted him, Crescens and Titus had gone to Galatia and Dalmatia. There's a difference between going somewhere and deserting. Easy to think about the difference. It's an emotional difference, but where Demas just cut and went, right? And when a person deserts, they don't usually leave an explanation. They just go. We don't know enough. Paul doesn't give us enough to know, okay, exactly how did that come to pass? What really happened there? What's the backstory? We don't know. We just know that Demas deserted him, and Crescens and Titus, they went on. They went. I don't know. If I was a novelist, I could probably come up with a plot line that would, somehow work on that. But I'm not a novelist. I couldn't spin a plot if my life depended on it. Verse 11, but Luke is with me. Only Luke is with me. Luke, to me, is one of the more interesting characters in the entire New Testament. He shows up pretty routinely. The first place I ever encountered Luke was in the Gospel of Luke. I'm guessing that's the way most people would have. And then he wrote the book of Acts. Both of those books were written to Theophilus, a personage I don't really know much about. He's talked about twice, once in Luke, once in Acts. Well, probably know kind of the thumbnail sketch of who Luke was. He was a physician. Bear in mind what medicine was like in the first century. There were no stethoscopes. There were no antibiotics. There were no antiseptics. There essentially were herbs and oils and salves, and honestly, there were some barbaric things. I mean, bloodletting remained a common practice in medicine until the 1800s. Well, we don't know how good or how we don't know anything more about Luke's medical practice than that he was a physician. That put him in a unique category because of his education and background, but really nothing like a physician today. There was no such thing as a specialty. You just, it was all so very basic. There wasn't even aspirin yet. Okay. But here's the thing about Luke that I just find intriguing. In the book of Acts, there are long sections, most of it, where Luke reports events that happened. And then, like in a third person. And then he switches to first person. These are called the we sections. So it's clear that Luke didn't just do his research and then write an account of the events that took place, but that he was there experiencing the events. He was a traveling companion, a ministry companion of the Apostle Paul. And not just for the crusade times, right? He was there through somewhat good and awful times. I mean, right here, as Paul writes, he's in prison and Luke is with him. Now there's no reason to think that Luke was also in prison with Paul. Luke was a volunteer who was with Paul, but not imprisoned alongside Paul. It'd be easy to kind of think, well, what a nice guy. And he was. There's no question. But the concept that Luke would have been with Paul during his imprisonment, what we view as a Roman imprisonment, please, well, most of us have a very thin idea of what being in prison was in Paul's day. First of all, there was no attention to sanitation. There was no, believe it or not, there were toilets in his day. Not the same kind that we have, but there were toilets. Not in prison, though. There were some cells that didn't even have a drainage port. So that, well, you don't have to use your imagination very much to realize these cells were awful, okay? Second thing, the government didn't provide you with, they were not obligated to provide you with food or with a blanket or with virtually anything. Those things had to be brought to you by family or friends. That was, I think it's safe to make the conjecture here that Luke was that guy. He would have been the guy that would have taken food and blankets and other things to Paul. Well, think about this. As Paul was dictating this letter, there's a real strong chance that Luke would have arranged for the amanuensis, the secretary, for the writing materials, and then for somehow getting the letter out. Just this idea that Luke was with him. A short sentence. Only Luke is with me. Okay, that's physically present. But there's this other aspect that we can't ignore. And you and I both have experienced times when people were not just physically with us, they were with us, right? Emotionally. That was Paul's sense of Luke. He was with him. Yes, he was there. I don't think he camped out in the cell. I don't think they would permit that. But he was there physically, helping make provision for Paul. But beyond that, he was there emotionally for support. Okay, Luke. I think the world would be a very amazing and much more beautiful place if there were more people like Luke in it. And then he says something that would be easy to, buzz past. Get Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in my ministry. Mark. Okay, this is generally accepted to be the Mark who wrote the Gospel of Mark. This is John Mark, the young man who had fled the garden when Jesus was arrested and had, the implication in the Gospel is that he was he left his cloak and ran more or less naked away. This is also the John Mark who was the nephew of Barnabas, who Barnabas had wanted to take with he and Paul on their second missionary tour. But evidently, well, this comes from the book of Acts. Luke had written it, that the disagreement between Paul and Barnabas over taking John Mark on this trip, Paul was so dead set against it, and Barnabas was so invested in taking Mark with him, they parted company. They split. And I told you this before, but the Greek there is the word for renting a garment. That relationship was ripped over John Mark, because John Mark had he deserted them on their first trip. And I think Paul was saying, I'm not taking, he's not mature enough to go. He can't do it. And I think Barnabas would have said, let's give him a chance. Let's help him grow beyond that. Paul said, no. Well, he didn't even just say no. He said it so adamantly and so, I believe, forcefully. But I don't know that I can say it terminated their relationship, but, well, we never read about Barnabas again in the book of Acts. Paul picked up Silas as his traveling companion, and you hear only about Paul and Silas and Timothy and Luke as traveling companions. So, but here, right after talking about Luke and what I think is his loyalty, his reliability, his solidness, go get Mark and bring him with you. Paul, is it too much to think that Paul must have changed his opinion of Mark? And he goes on, he says, remember, he had asked, in verse 9, he had asked Timothy to do your best to come to me quickly. And then he says, get Mark and bring him with you when you come, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. Mark is another one of those characters I wish we knew more about. How did he, what did he do that made Paul rethink his value, his maturity, his, or was it that Paul somehow, by some means, at some time, determined, maybe I should give him a second chance? We don't know any of that. We do know that what Paul said was, he is helpful to me in my ministry. Well, here's what I gather from that. Mark had matured. He was previously so unhelpful that Paul didn't want him along. Now he is helpful. He has matured to the point that he brings value. He's helpful in Paul's ministry. Boy, there's more there than we'll know in this life anyway. So what anything to take from these couple of verses? A couple of things. One, I want to be like Luke. I want to be loyal and reliable and dependable. I want to be with the people in my world. All right, okay. Second thing is, God is a God of second chances. And John Mark is a case in point. So am I. and so are you. Okay, time's up. I'll pick it up again next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.